episode, Mystery Muskies of the Canal there. So you can see there's one of our Esox masquerade buddies right there. It's a cold spring sort of day. I'm just going to cover some basics on this show. I'm extremely careful about muskie fishing. I don't actually won't do too many shows of this sort of nature because I protect these creatures as sort of a lot of people, they don't handle them properly. They don't do a lot of things right. So if you are going to be hunting muskies in the canal, the problem is you're not going to have a good time. It's not You're not going to run out and catch 30 in an afternoon sort of thing. We'll put that. I've known people that have fished here over 5 decades. They've tried hundreds and hundreds of times and not even gotten one yet. Almost any person that you could talk to that would go by in this system wouldn't believe there's any in here whatsoever, right? Sort of thing. So that's one thing. B, I don't use nets and these kinds of things, but I'm extremely careful with these fish. I've released some, caught the same fish. I have an eidetic memory with any of their scars, any kind of thing, and I've seen the fish years later, so they all survive and that sort of thing. I'm extremely careful. I don't use certain kinds of baits a lot of times too because of the area and things. Certain ones could harm them a little bit more chance and that sort of thing like that. So if you are going to be hunting muskies in there, don't be doing things like I do some of my challenges with even sewing thread or these insane sorts of things. This is only for the most elitist sort of kind of people, right? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? The lefty craze out there and these kinds of, like, somebody that's really has a lot of fishing experience, right? That has played thousands of huge fish, right? Like then yeah, you know, you can mess around, but otherwise use heavier sort of lines here. These fish aren't really bothered very much by myself or anybody really and that sort of thing, but they should be always released immediately. Don't be trying to eat anything out of this water system. It is so loaded full of virus, mutant things that people, let's say street people, may throw in the waters in the middle of their night when they're meeting their different friends. Let's say, right? Like, I tried to word this in a way for the, certain people, great age groups that I don't want to, but anyways, I think you get the idea here. This is a rough body of water. I'm only doing this just simply to highlight the pollution problems here, that these are beautiful creatures and there's muskies that have a possibility of world record like size, that they're not produced actually in the Rito system. There has muskies up to about the 60-inch range that have floated around in the Rito from time to time, but these are all much thinner fish. They're not remotely the size of an Ottawa River monster or in older days a St. Lawrence or Georgian Bay like fish, ones like that, right? So, and the second they get in there, one of these super giants, he starts getting thinner by the second because they don't hunt as well in there. This fish here was a natural canal fish that has always been in there, sort of thing. I can tell the difference usually, like by the sort of the way that they came in, right, and that sort of thing. But there's certainly a population that breed in there all the time, right, and that sort of thing like that. But a lot of them die off in the winter because they lower down the water to a foot or less in a lot of spots. And it's terrible. These fish, you'll see them dead up in the bank in the springtime and these kinds of things, right? So really release them. Don't make sure that the lines that that you'll be able to get the guy there. Make sure you have a net with you of a decent sort of size. It's much better a cradle, these kinds of musky cradle and that sort of thing. But unless you have people helping you and things like that, so be just very ginger with these guys. Don't be grabbing them by the eye sockets or in the gills. This can instantly kill them, right? And this sort of thing like this. I've seen so many people do these things over the years, right? And in my earliest times, I used to go to all these early tournaments and plead with them, why can't I let the fish go? And they didn't, right? Like, so they would want them for the ministries and all these kinds of things. So I had to put up with a lot of sort of weird things like that. And I'm very leery about sort of even a lot of my films, I don't show exactly sort of thing like this. And even some of my photographs have been sort of blurred out a little bit so the background can't be seen too much, because it's not that I don't begrudge people catching them. I'm teaching you how to do this and that sort of thing, the proper ways. But at the same token, just this is really, don't be in this body of water system. You know what I mean? Like ever try to eat one, release them, and yeah, you know what I mean? Because they're mutant full of poison anyways, and you don't want to eat them, right? So they're getting less and less supplies, these things, over the ages because of all kinds of introduction of foreign species and different things, sort of thing, right? So just keep those in mind. But this episode, what we're going to do is I'm just going to cover some basics. It's kind of funny. On this episode, I happened to run in at the opening season. There's the Muskie Joe Butcher sort of characters that are out as well. And the poor fellows got nothing. I've seen them come up every year. I've yet to see these guys catch one fish. But we were lucky. We did get a few, including the monster that sadly I came back in the afternoon, ran completely out of film after I did a carp fishing show, actually, for a little bit. I stopped and fished for carp for about 3 hours and got a big moose on this sort of thing. I wanted to combine the shows at first, but what I decided to do is I just cut that part out and just completely leave it them carp sections, that sort of thing like that. But we did get one real monster. It was actually the biggest so far that I've gotten on the film for these shows, because these were all filmed on weekends and the heaviest sort of traffic, when all kinds of 5 million boats are around and garbage and all this kind of thing. And I purposely did this. It's the times that I had it. Most of the shows were between a 4 to a maximum of about 7 hours. Unlike every other sort of fishing show in this world, these guys do this for a week quite often to even get a few fish on film. I did these every time within hours with crappy phones. I used $2 cheap real phones, used a dollar store like contraption that made it like a GoPro, and filmed away until it ran out of film, usually about an hour and 15 minutes later, I think was about the typical time. And so each time I would then stop for a while, sort of do it, charge it up again with a cheap dollar store sort of thing, and redo it again, right? So mostly that every time all you got here was actually me fishing and a few hours here, and these are the things that I was able to accomplish through these shows. This is going to be my third sort of series now on this sort of thing, but we already have 2 sort of seasons backed up here already. So there'll be a lot of fish here, sort of thing like that. But then I'm going to use, because there's cold front conditions and things, I'm going to go down to way smaller sort of things, but increasing their profile to make them a bit bigger, to be more attracted to a muskies instead of some of the other species that are floating around in there and that sort of thing like that. So this is our buddy Esox masconage, sort of thing like this, and the Ottawa River that feeds this system. It was at one time the greatest muskie fishery in the entire world. Still is one of the best out there, but there's some others out there too that are pretty decent and things like that. And sadly, zebra mussels have done certain things to these, but there's still tons of them around. So, and there's certain sections of the river that didn't get these problems as much, that still have different sorts of population zones, right? So it's not all doom and gloom. It all depends on where you are. But in a lot of major cities, these zebra mussels have caused a huge sorts of amounts of problems. So keep that in mind. Don't throw foreign species in our water. Don't put our garbage, throw your garbage in there. This is a rare photo again. I happen to get lucky sometimes where there isn't floating garbage all over, but you'll see on the films, but it's sad. I even have on one of them, on one of the shows that I did, that I was hunting pike and muskies and stuff. I did like a double one sort of thing because in the same areas on rivers, quite often you'll catch a muskie, then an hour later, pike will move in on them and walleyes, all in the same exact location within inches. So many species have same kinds of preferences. A lot of people don't realize that, but it just, that, especially on rivers, they'll all use the exact same spot with not much variance, right? And that sort of thing like that. But anyways, this show will be doing there. We'll cover some basics. I'll tell you a wild story. I was thinking about it. I hadn't actually turned 5 yet. So when I landed this muskie over 60 inches, I was just turning 5. I was going to be 5 within weeks, I think, or something, right? And that sort of thing like that. So it was actually 4 and sort of thing. And I landed a muskie, my first one over 60 inches, and I've quietly over the ages been continuously doing that. When there wasn't live release world records and things like that, I had released a 68.5-inch giant, a 68-inch one, which still there's sadly sort of one of these super titans. Actually, there's still a photo of it, but sadly, the fellow that I used to fish tournaments with, he was so infuriated by this catch of mine because he also loved muskie fishing, and he had never remotely ever seen one this big. But this was way like ages ago, right? When these waters were way more virgin and sort of things like that. And a lot of times I caught 15 to sometimes over 20 muskies a day commonly in the early days, and sometimes 25, 28, and once, only 7 times in my life, 30 plus sort of thing. And these are extraordinary. I doubt too many. I've never heard of any famous musky anglers ever achieving such things, right? But I guided there constantly every day and sort of things like that. And I fished for multi-species. And some of these bays you'd go in, these fish never see lures before. When I first started guiding on the rivers, you would largemouth bass over 7 pounds, some even a few over 8 over the years. Actually, you'd have a lure leg on the side of the boat and just trying to push your way 2 more inches, and a giant bass would come out of nowhere. They had no fear of humans. I've seen things that in the earliest days that would make the most famous anglers in the world jealous in the body of the water that I lived around, right? I mean, the most extraordinary fishing in the universe. Like, I mean, unbelievable, man. Like, the most crazy stuff you ever seen, because the fish, there was no people fishing it, and the ones that were, there was nobody in my sort of range, right? Like remotely, these kinds of people, they didn't start showing up until way in the 80s, a little bit better anglers and that sort of, and like it started getting more and more improved by 90s and that sort of thing. But previous to that, I mean, it was just an Uncle Joe guy with a cigar in his mouth and a case of beer, right? so I mean, every day, right? I mean, these fish, you know, and I'm using high quality equipment and know how to find fish and everything, as you can imagine, the fish that I saw, right? So I mean, I was spoiled, right? And nowadays I have to work way more harder for all these things, right? But in the day, that's what it was. So anyways, we'll continue on. I stabilized this show better than the first show. I'm not going to be talking about all kinds of historic muskie guides and this sort of thing like that. I didn't really have any muskie guys much besides Tony Portcasso, a little bit of Joe Butcher, people like that. But really, like, I disagree with a lot of these guys and use a lot of different techniques that they don't use. Like, because I grew up wading the rivers every day and things like that, and a lot of times we catch 10, 15 muskies in a day's time, with even small rapalas, crappie jigs I've used that have increased their profile, 10 million weird sorts of spinner baits and all kinds of things that I would use that normal people might think as a bass sort of more bait or different things like that. But I also then go the other extreme using Titanic monster baits that are around the 2 foot sort of range, right? So all depends, right, on what I'm hunting for in the areas, right? So, but anyways, this show, so we will do them from time to time, but I'm not going to do too many. I will do some more fly fishing shows and more remoter areas where I can cover it where you're not really going to see exactly where the backgrounds are of these things. But anyways, you know, I'm just very leery when it comes to muskies because they're such a rare, precious commodity, right, and that sort of thing like that. But anyways, hopefully some of my techniques will help you out catch a fish or two. And I was thinking too, I had done a mystery show on another channel, and I put some fish on there that and there's some good techniques for suics and a little bit of spinner baiting that I did in there. So I might sort of add that at the end of this just as an extra sort of thing, but it was a different show. I'd only spent, what was it, 2 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours? Yeah. So 4.5 hours of fishing, and I got like two muskies, had one follow it, and about 5, 6 pike or something, right? So sort of thing like that. So I might include that anyways, just to make it one sort of show. So anyways, stay tuned and we'll continue on. Bye for now. Today's rod, we're going to be using an 80s flipping stick, 20 pound mono, dollar store brand here, so no leaders, homemade spinner baits, large and small sort of thing. But what I'm doing is I'm these smaller ones I'll show you when finally we do some different sort of things. And it's really cold. It's just opening season day and that. And also for entertainment, there's a couple of Three Joe Butcher sort of guys that believe they're the world's greatest muskie anglers, sort of thing. So that they come along and. I actually way outfished them. They didn't catch nothing the entire day. I felt sorry for them. Talked to them after, as one of them hooked into a dock, even that sort of thing like that. But anyways, they had a nice boat and that sort of thing. But I've seen this guy before, and I think he ropes in characters believing that he's some kind of guide on there, but really this guy, I only see him about once every 2 or 3 years, and he always brings a few people. He's there for one day, never see him again, sort of thing. So I guess he must get like 300-400 bucks from these characters, and they're the only thing they're going to hook is a weed. So anyways, this body of water is very strange and that sort of thing like that. So keep that in mind when you're hunting, and it's not sort of yeah, you know, like a certain thing. But anyways, I'm just showing you some basic techniques on it and that. Oh, and I'd forgotten, I had mentioned just previously there about this one Titanic muskie that I like. I have a few in the mid 60 some range, and that's the photos left. But this two of my biggest ones, the one of them, a fellow that I used to fish tournaments with, was kind of upset about this Titanic monster that I got. So he had the camera and years of pestering him constantly, you know, give me the film so I can get this developed. And oh, I don't know where it is, right? But I know that, you know, I mean, that it's probably still on this fellow's possession, but sadly he passed on. And so his family may still have it. So if they happen to recognize me, his name was Ian, and he was a very nice fellow. I used to bring him in tournaments all over the place, and he made it to classics with me and different sort of things. One of the better partners I ever sort of had. He was excellent all around sort of fisherman and that sort of thing. But so he was really a guy who loved muskies and that sort of thing, and Yeah. Well, when they're this big, right? I mean, these are fish of, yeah, you know what I mean, of dreams of anybody, right? Sort of thing like that. But, in those days, like I said, we had a lot more fish available to us and that sort of thing like that, right? So, but anyways, well, I'll continue on there. The show's a bit blurry at first. This was the first season, the first try. It was done with actually between an old busted phone, like I said, these dollar store phone, that I figured out a way of doing it. But originally, the first thing I had was this GoPro knockoff, and I'd used it. And sadly, the big monster of this sort of thing when we came back after fishing, the biggest one I've gotten on film of the sort of shows here on these weekends. And this is the third season coming up, so maybe we'll get another bigger monster. Who knows? But right at this point, that was the biggest that I had gotten in the two seasons. But sadly, it ran out of film. Right, so all we had left was a guy. I was lucky. I got one fellow to take a picture of me hand landing it, and then I got one of me lifting it up in the air, sort of thing. But besides that, right. So anyways, it is what it is. But the film gets a little bit better, but you get some good tips with this one. It's a bit of a smaller one. I'm going to probably add, like I said, that other sort of instruction video about Suix that was filmed actually for my other sort of show for In Search of Giant Esox, sort of just to, yeah, you know what I mean, for the show. But I might as well add it to this one and combine the two because both of them are. I didn't massively do a lot of filming, right? Just sort of musky fishing. It's I mean, you could pull up and get like 3 in 10 minutes, or you could take 3 in 10 hours, right? And way less sometimes, right? Like so, it all depends, eh? Like, but that sort of thing like that. But I'm pretty bloody proficient with them. Like I said, I've been reeling them in consistently since I was 4. So, so anyways, we'll continue on that. But that was the baits there. I never use leaders. There's no such a thing. If I ever in a few remote areas that I was in, when pike were inhaling, like they were so fast that I couldn't even react in time for these things. In rare cases like that, I have used 7-strand wire and sort of thing. Oh, that was something on my previous bass show. I did want to say something that wasn't sort of correct. I was being a bit mean to the Van Damenites out there, sort of thing. Many tournaments, the course fish finder was working, and I did need them to a certain degree to find these spots, like more home in on them and all these kinds of things like that. But all I was saying is that it's very capable if you understand how to read terrain, the land, right? Like, I mean, when you look at islands and things like that, I mean, if you see that it's a massive beach in front of it for miles, well, then obviously it's shallow water, right? And it's there's no cover there. It's all a sandy beach. Only random fish are in the evenings or different weird times if they're chasing minnows. You might have fish up on such things. I've even used this as a tournament pattern, fishing on beaches because there was 10 million people fishing all the other sort of spots, and there was schools of minnows on some of these beaches, and they were abandoned because it was in the fall, and I ended up getting 4 big fish off of these sort of things, right? Like, so there's weird things out there that you wouldn't see in normal sort of publications, or things that all kinds of weird secondary, third crappy spots where these kinds of things can exist. But typically you wouldn't want to fish a spot like that. But now if the island had a bit of a shoal there, and then all of a sudden it drops off and there's chunk and boulder and it reaches out into the main lake sort of area, that would be a much more probable sort of island for many species of fish. Like, you see what I mean? So there's ways of understanding the terrain. And yes, now you don't really know exactly what the fish's depth is, but by working elimination through the thing, eventually by quickly eliminating each sort of family lures of ones that'll typically work. And then once you're desperate, now start going down the chain, right? But I mean, yes, for sure, depth finders are extremely important and should be utilized when needed, right? But all I'm saying is, if they're not working, you still can win tournaments without having them, right? So that's what we'll continue on and stay tuned. Three Joe Butcher sort of characters out there swooping by. They look like the same boat that I see every year. I don't see any of these guys ever actually catch a fish ever once, sort of thing. All these massive decades, and I see more of them snagging docks. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that. Usually, that's about half the time, sort of things. But all kidding aside, though, a lot of people they watch the TV shows and doing the figure eighting and all that kind of stuff. But this body of water is very strange and a little bit slightly different there. So I use a lot of bizarre techniques that you wouldn't see in total normal muskie circles and stuff like that. And I caught my first muskie when I was 4 years of age. When I was 5, I reeled in a muskie over 60 inches in length. Nobody knows exactly how big that the thing was. It took me an hour and a half on an Alcedo Micron spinning reel in Charleston Lake in the stream that I would fish with these little crappie jigs in the later 60s in the stream. And you'd catch like all these big bass with them and whitefish, lake trout, and all kinds of stuff. So I was probably one of the world's first practitioners of these sort of stuff. I use them for a lot of trout species and continue to do so. I've even released whitefish of world record your size and stuff like that on tiny little crappie to tube like jigs, sort of stuff like that. So I definitely would be one of the earliest practitioners of this sort of a thing. And I loved using real light 2, 4, 6 pound line sort of stuff, and had this Alcedo Micron spinning reel and stuff like that. And nobody knew at the time there was giant muskies in the lake. And somehow this muskie had went over the dam, I guess, in the spring and stuff. Once in a while, a big pike or other things would get washed in there. And I saw this fish, and I couldn't believe that because this fish was much bigger than me at the time, sir. So I kept going around following this fish, casting this blue plastic worm and these crappie jigs sort of a thing. I like blue plastic worms in these sort of clear sort of waters and things like that. So anyways, I kept casting at this thing, and it would move its eyeball, and she would look at it but just never sort of bother with it. And yet you could tell she was hungry. Her stomach had sunk in quite a bit. Like, she must have been quite fat, originally sort of a fish, but as she had thinned out a little bit because of this sort of thing. So I was walking along, and on the grass there was this crushed frog. I guess somebody had stepped on it or whatever, or something happened to it, and it was half dead, but it wasn't really stinky yet. So I figured with the crappie jig head, there was just barely like a little bit of a hook. They're not that large, and I would use sometimes my own, just wrapping little pieces of cut up lead and stuff like that, but just make the hook a little bit stronger, but very small, like profile, like jigs, and tie hair to them and different things, when the twisters first came out, the little tiny twisters and things like this sort of thing. But anyways, I just barely hooked this thing on the nose so that there was still some of the hook there sticking out. And I lobbed it in front of this thing, and the second I jerked it in front, I seen her eyeball roll. She just inhaled it sideways. I went like this, bang. I just got her in the side of the sort of a mouth, inside her jaw, just barely, and it was just away from her teeth. And near an hour and a half later, it almost drowned me because there was deep pools in this stream, and I had to actually leap in the water sometimes to stop it from taking all the line out of the reel and stuff like that. So for a little tiny child to be able to already sort of do these sorts of stuff on his own with no sort of help here sort of thing, it was witnessed in front of the store owners in Charleston Lake. And this is the wildest thing in the universe. I was actually mugged for a muskie. So I finally landed this fish. I'm out in the stream, and it was bigger than me. I couldn't do anything with it. I was holding on to it to dear life. So I screamed to the son of the owner of the store to go get my mother or parents there to somebody's got to get a camera, this sort of thing. And this huge American sort of early bodybuilder sort of looking character, 6 foot something on him, but a bit more like of a farm-like sort of a fellow. And he says, "Oh my goodness, little fella, that's the biggest fish I've ever seen in my entire life. It's bigger than you." He says, "Here, I'll help you up with it," like this. So I'm trying to wade, and the water was right up to my chin and stuff like that. And I finally make it near the bank, and yeah, I couldn't lift this thing out of there and everything. So I was just holding on to it, underneath his jaw, a typical sort of thing. A Vulcan death grip here, not wanting to let this thing go, and sort of thing. And anyways, this American guy was even this how huge this muskie was, that even a great big 6 foot something dude on him, like this guy had to be probably about 6'3" to 6'5" range, a real sort of a giant fellow. And anyways, the guy dragged me and this guy and the fish, and I'm holding on. We finally get way up on the bank. The guy says like this, "I'll help you get it up," and now this thing's taller than I am, and he's lifting it up. All of a sudden, he grabs it underneath the jaw like this, rips it out of my hand, and then kicked me and pushed me right back, flying right into the stream in Charleston Lake. So, so even security around the camp and stuff looked for this guy, but it was so huge that it was up around where his boob was. And he was actually couldn't lift it. Even a great big guy like that was having trouble, and was running with it down the street and disappeared into this forest-like area, dragging it. So I'm convinced still to this day that either some wild, Hat Rocks kind of characters had this giant mutant muskie for dinner, or that it's up on some American guy's wall telling you the big story. So my love affair with muskies has continued on, sometimes reeling in massive, many hundreds per year, sort of thing. I've 7 times in my life I've reeled in over 30 muskies in one day, and I've released muskies up to 68.5 inches that was measured. And so I've never made my catches publicly known, but you can read about them in my books and all my weird techniques that I use and stuff like that. But we're going to be throwing the ED here a little bit, and if that's not working, we may be going to some smaller baits because it's real cold front skies. It's not a good time of year here for the big monsters. These females have spawned out and stuff like that. There's barely any weed growth here. It's just growing up, sort of a thing. And so we got our work cut out for us. So I'm going to have to cover some different waters, stuff like that. Plus, I got some competition going here, so that's good. So, like I said, from my experience of watching many guys that they got the look down. They look like the Joe Butchers out there, being able to do the pretty decent cast and the figure 8 and all the kind of stuff, and they're looking at their depth finder and seemingly knowing what they're doing, but they're not catching anything because they follow again too many trends and stuff like this. Like, as a for instance, I saw one time the river monster hunter guy, and then all of a sudden I seen in the region all these people with these. You could tell that the musky rod in the reel was newer than sort of you know what I mean. It still almost had the tags attached to it, sort of a thing. And the guy's got 2,000 pound gorilla braid sort of idea, and then this big sort of swim bait that Jeremy Wade was using, sort of thing, right? And so I'm not I don't follow sort of these trends and stuff. I'll use these, practice whatever the bait is for a bit, but I guarantee you that the problem is with most baits are mass-produced and sent out there to the millions and stuff like that, is millions are using them, but the fish get used to them quite quickly and stuff like that. So I make a lot of my own musky stuff. I have been since a child, all kinds of giant flies to mega-sized spinnerbaits that would blow your mind, the nerve of some of the ones that I'm willing to cast. But I'm looking for monsters, but I also use a lot of light line, weird sort of stuff like this. I discovered this as a little kid in the later 60s because of, like I said, living on multi-species of rivers. Sometimes you catch 10, 15 muskies, even 20 muskies sometimes in one day,
plus on just like blue and silver rapalas, or all kinds of like early sort of plugs and weird things like that, just twitching them along grass lines and things like that. And because back in those days, there was in these rivers around here, nobody was fishing them barely and stuff like that, and they were loaded full of 5 million logs and all kinds of debris and stuff. So very few boaters would go out in these things. So you could go in these back bays and be casting like early spinner baits, all kinds of baits. And I mean, these fish would, when sluggos first came out, used to quite often catch like between 10 to 15 muskies a day was about pretty well average, just with this one technique, twitching them across in these back bays along grass lines and stuff. Or sometimes we'd shove like a couple of nails in it and stuff like that, cast along deeper weed edges. Also work real good for big pike, and you'd even get slammed on big walleye and other species off and stuff like that. So you got to think out the box, outside the box when it comes to muskies and stuff like that. So we're casting around here and stuff like that. I'm flinging this bigger bait and stuff like that. And you want to, like, if you're not familiar with the area, as I was mentioning before, fan cast. So I'm not showing you as a typical fan cast because I know this body of water. Like I fished it for over 5 decades now, so I quite understand like exactly where sort of I don't need to be fan casting sort of much here or these sort of things, because I'm already quite familiar with the terrain here, sort of thing. But typically speaking, if you're not, these are things you'd want to do and stuff like that. If you're fishing from shores and stuff like that, keep an eye out for things like look for weed edges and big patches of different sorts of weeds that you may. Muskies can be attracted to many kinds of weeds. I've gotten them in everything from huge piles of sandgrass sort of flats to pencil reeds to your typical lily pads and cabbage, broadleaf and curly and all the gag. Like so, many sorts will sort of hold muskies. It just depends on the body of water and stuff like that. Some of them will even use weird stuff like hydrilla and all these, depending on the body of water and what they have available to them and that sort of thing like that. They also love like standing timber. So if you don't only think of these spots as bass, like I've won all kinds of big pike and muskie contests and walleyes even and different things by also fishing in these same sorts of similar like areas, sunken big trees on rivers and things like that. Quite often individual big fish of different species will hunker up on these sorts of stuff. So if this isn't working there after a bit, but what I'm doing is I'm just trying different paths to retrieve slower. It's a bright gold skies and stuff like that. And this body of water is weird too. You don't typically need to ever, almost ever do figure eighting sort of stuff. You'll see, I can tell the guys that really don't know the water that well. They may think they do. They come up, you'll see them once or twice a year, but really they're not catching anything much, or if anything at all, sort of thing, from what I've ever seen and sort of stuff. And it's because of these sorts of things like that. I mean, this water is crystal clear. You'll see the muskie way before it's even, if you're watching your lures and your bait, you should be able to see this fish a long time before you even need to do a figure eighting and stuff like that. Always keep the lure moving. That's a very important sort of a thing like that. But other bodies of water, figure eighting is extremely important. It all depends on the thing, but always be ready to do it. It doesn't matter, even in this body of water or stuff like that, there's always sort of, some days are weird or whatever. But typically, me, I don't almost never have to figure out anywhere I go. I almost always hook the fish fairly right away if there's one in this sort of area. Almost quite often from the 1st to 10th, 20th cast sort of thing like that. So this fish in 10,000 casts is only true if you're not familiar with the spot, not using the right bait, and all kinds of stuff like that. It's really, muskies are actually a lot more unintelligent than a lot of other species. Carp are much more harder to catch sometimes than muskies. But it all depends on the water. In this body of water, they have been pestered a little bit and stuff like that. And there's not as many of them. Like, it's not 5 million. There's tons of them in the Rito system. but in other sections, in this section, there's only so much to go around, and it fluctuates. Some years when they open up the locks, once in a while monsters will get in here, you know, the 50-some inch range, and these sorts of stuff like that, and occasionally even a bigger will float in from time to time. Like biologists, they say some. There was one guy apparently studied around here, and I mean the places that they claim in the newspapers and stuff that they live only in a hole in Dow's Lake is the most silliest sort of stuff ever. I mean, this would be the last place of interest to me to fish on this body of water typically. Usually fish that are in holes and stuff like that are more lethargic and much more difficult to work over. So only if you're sort of getting desperate here or need to really muster up a fish and you know it's there, you can keep, you know, bumping over their heads, doing different things. Eventually, maybe you'll get a response out of the fish. What I call torture fishing, you know, you cast 100, 150 times the same log until finally you drive it nuts. Well, you can do this sort of thing with a fish like that, but I mean, it's much more beneficial to look for fish that are much more towards the sort of surface and shallower sorts of stuff like that. These fish are hunting. They're more active and aggressive, and that's what they're there for, sort of like that and sort of thing. So they'll take. They're typically just more likely to sort of hit where they're not going to be following as much. They're not going to be doing these kinds of stuff like that. Other things, I don't use leaders whatsoever, as you can see in some of these early photos here. Like I said, been fishing for muskies religiously since 4, even waiting for them. You know, some of the stuff I did, mind-boggling stuff, is like unheard of in the world of history of angling, of these kinds of weird stuff that I would do. But quite often I'd sneak out my window at nighttime and go wade in the Reno River system and stuff like that. And actually, you'd catch these muskies quite often. I'd be reeling the lure, and it'd be like a moonlit night out and stuff like that. You'd just be pulling it out of the water, and I'm only like 4, 5, 6, 7. Like I kept doing this all the way growing up, sort of a thing. And I would wade out, and these fish sometimes big as me, and sometimes even bigger at the time, depending on the how small it was. And they would come up and blow up right at you, right in the last billionth of a second, eh? So I learned as a young kid to sort of, like in the dark there, I'd always do a little bit of a figure 8 sort of a thing, no matter what, because even though they didn't typically follow it, place like that, sometimes they would at night, especially. Absolutely, you want to talk about a terrifying experiences when you're a little boy, wading around doing that all night, sort of thing. So I did a lot of crazy stuff there. I would get a lot of old big musky lures because they were expensive. I'd make a lot of my own, but I also would get a lot from like garage sales and stuff, and buy big old bait casting reels, anybody ones that if they had them around, and this kinds of stuff, eh? So I experiment a lot on them with fly rods and ultralight line and all kinds of stuff like that. So in my books there, I'll tell you all about the bug for the muskie and some other wild sorts of stories out there that are all true, and it could be verified. Like I said, those people at the Charleston Lake, the store, actually the owners of it at the time witnessed the whole sort of thing. So a wild sort of a thing. So as far as that goes, like for 4 2-pound line, I brought in a pretty decent muskie in a muskie in a tournament, a big fish sort of a tournament that they had, and I got that on 2-pound test line, and on purpose because it wouldn't bite other sorts of things. So I do a lot of strange techniques and all kinds of weird stuff that you wouldn't typically see in other sort of musky sort of stuff like that. So anyways, we're done about casting here. We'll go on to sort of and we'll hit some other spots, and then we're going to finally do some carp fishing and stuff like that. So my shows are a bit odd. I like promoting carp and other weird species too. So, and like I said, I've been multi-fish species since a tiny child. I just like doing this sort of thing, not just one species typically. Some days that's all I target is carp or bass or muskies or walleyes or whatever. But most of the time I like doing multi-species in the same sort of a day sort of thing. So anyways, stay tuned. And other things, I wanted to give you a few other sort of tips and things like that is that other things about muskies is quite often, like if you're fishing from shore and stuff like that, even if the lake's like deep and stuff like that, but you can reach like some of these deeper areas and stuff like that, a lot of muskies suspend, like even in the river systems and stuff, like it could be like 80 feet of water, but the fish is right up near the surface and there's no structure around of any sort anywhere and stuff like that. But some of these giant muskies will stay up in the higher water column and they'll suspend around groups of like moon eyes and other kinds of stuff like that. So keep these things in mind, and also that other places that I've found really sort of a consistent across the board at almost any sort of time of year is odd, like cliff-like places where it's sheer vertical walls that just drop off really quick, or that even better if they have very small ledges along a river system, like let's say it's like 3 or 4 feet of this ledge and all of a sudden it drops into really deep water. These kinds of spots like that can be tremendously interesting for occasional giant monster muskies that will use these sort of paths throughout the day, and at certain times they'll come up on these shallow sort of stuff, and very few people would realize this sort of thing. But I've been doing this all my life, following them around and sort of stuff like that, just as much from boats and shores, sort of a mixture of both. And I've been successful in reeling giant monsters in both sorts of ways, right? So I do a lot of sort of stuff like that, everything from trolling for them to using giant flipping jigs for them and all kinds of weird stuff. So anyways, I'll cover other techniques and other shows here, but we're just highlighting the canal. And please, I mean, even if you don't care about the carp or these other stuff, or even if you don't care about the ducks or the turtles or other stuff like that, hopefully even the muskie fans out there, at least, you know, should protect your water, stop throwing in garbage and stuff like that. Like everybody, we need to all, you know, everybody might forget an odd Tim Hortons cup or some weird little thing that's all been done before, I'm sure, but I mean, try and, you know what I mean, keep an effort of it. I mean, nobody's perfect, but every time, the less that you're forgetting and throwing into our water systems, the more bigger muskies we're going to have and all kinds of other wonderful fish to be around you, you know, sort of thing. So anyways, stay tuned, and we'll get down and we'll hunt past a few other spots and go down to Dow's Lake and then do some carp fishing. Okay, folks, look at this, the garbage here. This is the main reason I did this. I'm a very private guy, and I've never really made any of my sort of accolades or things known of these sorts of stuff. And I've been retired from this for quite a few years now and stuff like that. And here's some other tips there besides... Please don't throw these things in the water. Yes, that could be a piece of structure for fish. You know, could be worse things sitting there, because that sort of stuff is wood and this sort of thing. But the amount of, every time they have races here with, you know, thousands of granola wrappers floating by, bottles of water, you know, bags of chips and rotten Ronnies and coffee cups and all this kinds of stuff, it becomes mind-boggling. But that's just some of the stuff. Other people throw in way worse toxic stuff. There's a fellow that we saw, and other people witnessed this guy doing this. There's businesses along this canal here that are actually, instead of, because they don't want to pay for the fees of the garbage, they throw it instead. They sneak over and sort of drop it in. In fact, some of them are pretty brazen about it and sort of stuff like that. It's an awful shame. I mean, really, like so. But anyways, I just did this break. This was actually meant for another show here, but I'm doing this recording sort of over it here, sort of thing. So anyways, stay tuned. So there we go, folks. We're into muskie here. Finally. We had another one follow it there, but I don't know if it actually picked it up on the film or not. But anyways, it's scrapping here away. Decent Scooby. Oh, there he is. Wee! Scooby! So anyways, young Scooby here. She's got a bit to grow yet to be a real monster, but meanwhile, Muskie Jim and the gang, I've been seeing them going around in a circle trolling for hours, and they haven't gotten squat. So, so Well, here we go. So at least we're into some fish here, and hopefully we get another one or two, and then we'll go carp fishing here and stuff like that. But like I said, I wanted to just show some of these things. So anyways, we'll go on to the next spot here. So this is Dow's Lake here. It widens here, and it's a lot harder from shore, of course, because the wider it is, the less water you can cover of all the sort of stuff that's out there and sort of stuff. It's bright conditions. There's barely any weed growth left and stuff like that, but we'll see if we get one more. I'll cast around here for a bit and stuff like that, so see what happens. And then, other things you want to do, like like I said, yeah, look at these guys here. Well, I see them; they're down there somewhere, so we'll probably run across them in a bit. But I mean, even with all the tackle and all this stuff, and even though they got the Joe Butcher look going and all this stuff, you know what I mean? They're not hooking them, and so. Bango, here we go. So now we're into another one here. So that didn't take massively long, oh, there he goes. Ooh, nice jump. But anyways, we'll see here. We'll be going to go, probably, I'm not going to go much further doing the muskies, and then we'll go carp fishing and stuff like that. But anyways, I just wanted to show you here a little bit of stuff. These aren't the big monsters that I hunt. I hunt the giants usually and stuff like that. But we had to use some smaller stuff here. Here it is, nice fish. I mean, pretty decent. You can do worse. So, anyways, certainly, you know, sort of thing. So I caught that with an extendo, sort of a thing that I used since the later 70s. There was some creation I came up with broken parts of lures and stuff.
Sunny and that sort of thing. Now it's nice chop. And this is when the big monsters hit. So if there is a giant around, let's hope this round we get it. Oh, give me a home where the giant muskie roam. So I'll cast this shorter version of a dollar store homemade giant spinnerbait that I've been making since the mid-70s, like I said, so a long time. So we're going to let her flutter down, It's more likely we'll have fish nearer to the surface as the day warms up. But it all depends on how many fish are sort of around, right? This place is extremely random. But we just have a better shot now if some had moved in or that weren't sort of active right that minute. Sort of thing. We have a better shot now with this sort of conditions. So as I was showing you there, spinnerbaits and jigs are very similar in the sense that you can work them. A lot of people don't do that, but I do. I use jigs even up on the surface. You can scooter them along and that sort of thing. And it's the same sort of process. I mean, the fish has to be somewhere from the top to the bottom. So if you don't have a depth finder with you and you're fishing for shore, you just have to check out all the sort of areas and see which one you first get a reaction on. And then if you've checked everything, then you move the families of baits and you keep working down until you get something, right? The older you get and the more wisdom you have and the longer you've been fishing, the quicker you'll know which one is likely going to work most of the time better, so you're not spending a quarter of your day wondering. That's where experience comes in, right? Sort of thing like that. Oh. But it's a beautiful day. Right now, if it stays like this and not like blast rain, sort of thing like that, I always bring my two coats there. I got another one underneath there. I had that on at Bruce, and now I'm back to this, and it's back and forth. But I kind of sweat in these a little bit. Oh. Oh, I don't see too many hardcore guys out here today. Sort of thing. Oh. Now, I'm not hitting right on the edges over there yet. I have a particular way of doing things. And so we're letting it flutter down, let it flutter down. The wind's nice here. Ooh. give me a home where the Chinese socks masquinage roam. And world record, the Pomus macrocheirus are floating around all day, where seldom is heard a discouraging word. And the Cyprinius Carpios are biting on my line today. Home, home on the range, where the deer are eating all the garbage today. So, it's very difficult to figure this out exactly what's the best sort of... Okay, there. Now I can see the bank a little bit better. It's really hard to do this on this budgetary thing. I need a camera lady or guy or something. That's what I need. So it's terrible when you're working a few spots with only so many dollar store-like baits. Eventually, you start burning them out even when the conditions are right, because those other fish that hit might have even just hit quicker, faster, right, like right on the first cast or anything. And this, well, it's like this now, right? Let it glitter down, glitter down, glitter down. Ooh, let it glitter down. So, we're just barely on that. Ooh, there we go, folks. So there's another one there. He's going around all over the place. So anyways, I'm going to have to shut off the camera because we're almost out of space here. And if we get another one, I don't want to lose a photograph. Bye for now. What balsa plug from Finland has caught more trophies than any other similar baits? The macho plug? The evil devil Jersey horse? The rebel popar? I should have put in or the Zell Roland, I guess. Or the Rapala. Do 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 boop 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 boop. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the answer is Rapala by Lori Rapala. And what a legendary lure. I started using these in the 60s. I caught my biggest smallmouth in my entire life, an 8-pound, 3-ounce smallmouth with a blue and silver Rapala. I couldn't get the amount of sort of different trophies that I got in different contests and things, using them as sort of partial part of the tournament or the full tournament sort of winnings or different sorts of things, and multi-species of fish from walleyes to smallmouth, largemouth, list goes on, saugers and anything from trout to salmon, you name it. They all hit them. So that guy's my hero, Lori Rapala. Big time. This guy started carving them and he started producing them there in the later 30s, and I mean, just the most astonishing sort of a lure that, and certainly a staple for many Canadians that, many Canadians and Americans have a Rapala in their tackle box, right? But anyways, we'll continue on now. Sadly, when we tried to put these in, because it's a different parts of shows and things, they weren't filmed exactly the same, and you had two cameras going back and forth. So the odd little sort of a clip out mistake happened here when we were sort of trying to crop. But anyways, the next show we figured out what these little things are. But anyways, we'll continue on. That sort of thing. Now we've switched baits, and we're going to be hunting with a suic here. And I'm actually going to hunt with suics up for walleyes in the canal later. So how do you like those for apples, eh? You wouldn't think of that, would you? However, we're going to try and see if we can get one sort of muskie here. The season's sort of closed down now here at these locking system. And this is the historic, like I said, Ottawa River here. And what we're doing here is an old trick I've been using since a little kid. I call it
Well, we used to call it different names that we that probably wouldn't be too popular nowadays. But let's call it, low budget trolling. We'll call it something like that, right? Sort of idea. So I think you get the drift here. And basically, what you'd be doing is you walk along this, and you sort of jerk it, and these fish will hide up underneath. This works great on locking walls worldwide. Doesn't matter where it is. It could be any kinds of thing. The Great Lakes has huge canal-like systems like here in different spots, right, where fish will sort of position themselves underneath these sorts of things and against them if there's little current breaks or any kinds of things like that. And just stay in the shade line sort of thing. You can see that there's a shade line here, right? And these monster predators and all kinds of species will use this, not only muskies, giant pike, bass, walleyes, and the list goes on and on, saugers sometimes, and different ones. So we might get lucky and get one here on film. I mean, I'm trying to do 2 shows at the same day, and it's a cold front with bright skies and way lower amounts of fish than what there used to be in the system due to the zebra mussels and a host of other things. Doesn't make it the most fun, right? But like I said, as my hat says, shut up and stop the whining and fish, right? You accept whatever is available in the water, right? Like, I mean, you can't make a 10-pound bass bite in the lake, and no matter, even if you fish 365 days a year, 24/7, if you were a robot, you still couldn't catch a bass that size if he doesn't exist in the water, right? So you have to put up with what's available, what's the sort of maximum sorts of things, right? So we'll work this a little bit. This is a terrible, like I said, not really good. It's supposed to cloud up a little bit. Maybe what I might do is walk down over there and cast a little bit, and then, come back and sort of, if there's a little bit of a chop that comes on the water or anything like that, that'd be certainly helpful. They don't see it as well. They're more active, and they're more likely to take a chance at it, right? Sort of thing. Now, you can see, one thing I hate about suics, since a kid, I've been, sometimes I had to weight them and stuff like that, so I'll attach bell sinkers. This one was actually made for this sort of thing, where it had a lead weight in it, but it fell out, so I don't like the design. They started copying, all kinds of people that have been doing this. I'm not the only one that started weighting their baits. All kinds of people have done this over the years, right, for all kinds of species. But for suics, sometimes, or you can soak them just in water until they become almost like neutral buoyancy. This one's still floating, but it helps with the bell sinker to get it down sort of more. And it makes also a bit of a clonk. Other things with suics that you want to do, and I've been fishing these since the late 60s, so a hell of a long time. I'm one of the earliest throwers of them in the business, right? So way before any of these swim lakes or like all these kinds of things, we've been doing these things a long time. What I like to do is sometimes I'll bend one sort of tail over the other, or I drill a hole through it and make like a small little spinner sort of thing with a better sample or a crane swivel, well, whatever's available, as long as the thing will spin a little bit, and he flashes around. Try and use a lighter blade, sort of like that, and small. Don't, once you get to a certain size, it sort of pushes. It's weird with the bait. It may still trigger a fish. You might even get a bigger fish, but it's just more difficult to work with, right? Sort of thing. So that's another thing. Other things I like to do is I'll attach in the 70s and stuff like that, when they started having all these early vinyl skirts and all these kinds of like those, like early living rubber ones and these different ones as they came along, sort of thing like that. I'd attach them on the back too and make like a sort of a fluffy sort of stuff. So I'd slide up and push them over these trebles, put it back on, and you got now 3 flashing sort of different colors that I'd make it like perch or sort of white, ones like that, right? This bait here works well because of the yellow-white color. It looks a lot like walleyes and saugers and these kinds of ones. ones that they'll typically feed off of, and it's the right size of a smaller one, and it's big enough to attract even a monster as a snack, right? Sort of thing like that. So you want to give them different actions and things like that. But if you want it to sink neutral buoyancy, what you can do is you can just keep sort of weighting it in a tub and sort of let it sink full of water and sort of things like that. And you can use like a coating over once you get the water in and it sinks a little bit. You can spray this weird plastic coating that'll actually dry around it. They use it for raincoats. I just, by fluke, I decided to test this stuff on it. I don't know what it's called. I don't remember. I haven't bought a bottle in years. But normally I don't need to do.
Moment, who wrote the first snow and angling book? Big Jim Magoo, Ernest Hemingway, James Henshaw, Mo Halol, Betty Smith, Chris Houston, Bob Azumi, Red Fisher, Dame Julia Bernards, or Charles Dickens? Do 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 do. So you got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the answer is Dame Julia Bernard's Treatise of Angle, 1400s. Now, in this book, is the date got cut out there, but it was in the 1400s. She mentions in the book Deaths from a Killer Pike, which we'll be discussing later. So now back to the fish. So she's scrapping away. Not a super mega giant, but muskie's a muskie. Still a beautiful creature. So anyways, not the 7-foot monsters we want, but it'll do. So anyways, stay tuned and we'll continue on.
Accomplish my job, right? Yeah. Usually if one's around, that's the sort of thing that I find usually within the first 5 minutes. Quite often it's the first cast, 2, 3 casts, 5 casts, 20 casts, somewhere in there, and that, yeah, you know, I'll get this thing eventually, right? If he's active and around, sort of, right? But if not, then stay with it and until one either moves in or they become active, right? Or sometimes, like I said, I call it torture fishing, just by simply constantly going over the thing's head. If I don't know that he's there or not, but he's sort of, yeah, you know, there could be one in this sort of area, well, then eventually what happens is I bugged him so many times and it starts getting annoying. It's like somebody shooting at you, you know, a baseball or something constantly every second. Eventually you're going to try and do something about this, right? It's the same kind of principle, kind of. Okay. So, no action here. But at least it's a nice day out. It's the interprovincial bridge that goes over into Quebec. Sort of thing like this. These are giant tires that they use to park boats and things like that. We have tourist boats down here if you want to check them out. Now, classic pieces that cover here, like these dogs and things like that. Like I said, I always cast first on the more sort of not right beside it. There could be an aggressive fish that was pushed off by a bigger fish, you know, sort of thing. And you might get, oh, there we go. Right on our right. Ha, 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 ha. See that? So there we're into some action. Whee! It's ESOC Solutions, Big Northern Pike. Not the one we wanted, but he'll still do. So there we go. Okay, so we'll, oh, geez. It's sort of wonky here. Oh, a good spot. Okay, we'll see if we can get him over this way. We'll just walk him up over the shore here. I just don't want to lift him up here because it's sort of, and I don't care if he falls off. He's already let it. Maybe a giant one now will come along. Okay. So. Okay. So, at least here we can put him up on the dock, sort of if he flops around the woods wet and all that sort of thing. Okay, so we gotta be careful here because these guys are wild character. Okay, he's gonna jump. Calm down there, Scooby. This is what I really hate. There we go. Now, normally I wouldn't sort of, okay. Okay, there we go. Now we got him in a safe spot here. Oh, no. You got to really be careful with northern pike because, oh, he's going to be annoying. I'm trying to get right in there. There we go. Okay. Okay, all right. He's not, it's just for some reason his little mouth part there is bleeding, but I think he'll be fine. Okay. So there we go. Ooh. Oh my goodness, that water is cold.
Folks, sadly, this was the big moose of the show, and we ran out of film. So you have to wait for another some more shows for some of that one. But this was our first sort of attempt on it, and that sort of thing like that. So then now I'll show you sort of next show there. What we'll do is it'll be Carping 101. We'll be back to bass. But it's all just circular sort of thing. That's why I suggest you subscribe. It seems very difficult. It astonishes me. People give you like world-class advice here. You can clearly see that obviously I do know how to catch some fish, sort of thing. But I'm very fascinated by in today's society how unusual it is. You'll have people that'll have like 10,000 sort of subscribers, and the guy's just mowing a lawn. Then another person that I'll see have great, fantastic shows, and nobody even sees them. I mean, I don't understand how it all sort of works, right? but it's interesting. Anyways, it's just one of those things. But hopefully more people catch on to this sort of thing over time. I explain more and more sort of things. It's just this was the first season, and the way that the films were filmed, you can only do so sort of much there. But obviously, you can see there's lots of big fish around. Here, my buddy Mr. Smallmouth was attacked by another monster one, and that sort of thing. So. Anyways, well, each different episodes, there's so many suckers and things. Like, actually, my first attempt on the sucker show, I actually got 4 fish that were either just at the same size or one was 1.5 inches longer than the current world record, all in one afternoon in the hot summer months, not at primetime sucker habitat when they're full of spawn where they'd be way bigger, right? And that sort of thing like that. But sadly, same thing, it was hard to sort of film. It was really not much to sort of like, because sucker fishing, it's not like, there's lots of things, but I mean, there's, it's a lot more basic sort of a fishing than a lot of sort of ones. At least you don't almost never need to do anything super fancy dancy here sort of thing. So the shows, like when it comes to those kinds of species, you have to talk more, right? So on these ones there, you're casting away and all that sort of thing. But anyways, we'll continue on, and there's, like I said, all kinds of different ones that were coming up. And I'm going to try and do some more shows there, maybe have some more sort of all kinds of different sort of wild sort of challenges and different sort of things like that. But anyways, we'll continue on, and hopefully you enjoyed this one. And next show there, we'll get on with the carp. And yeah, on the carp shows, it's insane because I catch so many sort of constantly, right? I mean, I could have shows for massive around the clock, just me battling them, right, and that sort of thing. But I'll explain you all the more really basics of carp fishing, and then some more modern sort of things for North American people that aren't familiar with English, like sort of things, and all kinds of things like that, and show you my North American ways of doing them, and these sorts of things, and we'll get some real monsters for you. And so, anyways, stay tuned. Hopefully, you enjoyed it.